We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? Give the call to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Under Labor, the price of everything is going up. Electricity is up 38%, gas up 37%, rent up 23%, health costs up 17%, education up 21% and childcare fees are up 27%. Because of Labor, families are falling behind and small businesses are on their knees. Prime Minister, how are Australians supposed to get ahead when Labor keeps making them pay more?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, today we are delivering real change to assist Australians. Today, wages go up, taxes go down. Today, paid parental leave expanded to 6 months today, and superannuation paid on paid parental leave. Workers' super, as a result of changes we have made, get paid from today on payday, making a difference. All urgent care clinics are made permanent today, meaning when it comes to the costs of health care, people can get the care that they need when they need it with just their Medicare card, not their credit card. All 137 clinics open.
Order.
There are more cheaper medicines from today, an additional 10 medicines added to the PBS. That is what delivering real change looks like. That is what makes a difference to people who are under financial pressure. And unlike the three right-wing parties with their axis of grievance, what we are doing is actually not just identifying issues but making a difference.
Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? The Manager on a point of order.
And I'd point to a previous ruling by you, Speaker, where you said I would bring the minister back to the question. It was a specific question about how much an electricity bill is and energy prices becoming more expensive. Now, you can add to that gas, rents, health costs, education costs and childcare fees, and then you said, I asked the minister to return to the question. So I think the question was about how much things are going up and the Prime Minister needs to return to it.
Thank the Manager for that point of order. Order. We'll hear from the Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, I think the key to how broad this question was the word everything.
Yeah. Order. Members on my left, the Manager raises a point of relevance, and just to deal with this, the relevance depends on the circumstances of the question. So it's pretty difficult to look at that question and say it's the same as this question. So I understand where it's coming from, but when the question raises so many issues, and the question does about the issue that he was asked about paying more, I think the Prime Minister is contesting that as a point, so he is being directly relevant. So the Prime Minister will continue.
Speaker, I tell you what's going up, the minimum wage. Yeah. Going up today. I tell you what's also going up, paid parental leave, up by 2 weeks.
Order.
I tell you what else is going up, the number of cheaper home batteries. 450,000 since last July. I tell you what else is going up, bulk billing rates, expanding and growing. What else is going up?
Order.
The number of people attending urgent care clinics, all going up. I tell you what else is going up. The number of first homeowners buying their own home as a result of the changes that we are making. We're not just identifying issues, we're acting on them. That's what the job is to do. Unlike the three right-wing parties, the axis of grievance, we're not just identifying issues, we are acting on them. Helping people under pressure here and now while building for the future. Making a positive difference to people's lives by delivering real change. Real change. I tell you what is also going up, the number of comments by opposition coalition members saying how hopeless they are. They had their housing spokesperson today say that we vacated the field for 20 years and we're now dealing with that failure, huge failure. Patricia Carvella said, when did you vacate the field? Andrew Bragg, after 2007.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Treasurer. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to help Australians with the cost of living, including by providing more tax cuts to help people get ahead? How does that compare to other approaches?
Great question. Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The member for Macquarie is a wonderful representative of workers and small businesses and families in her beautiful part of Australia. Today is a really important day, Mr Speaker, as the Prime Minister said a moment ago. We are delivering tax cuts, we're delivering help with the cost of living at the same time as we're delivering real change in the tax system to help first home buyers. Now, because today is the 1st of July, that means that there is another round of tax cuts delivered by this Albanese Labor government. All 5 of those tax cuts together mean about an extra $2,800 in the pockets of an average worker, Mr Speaker. The minimum wage is going up, award wages are going up, paid parental leave is being extended. We're extending the small business instant asset write-off, Mr Speaker. We're paying super with wages so people get the superannuation they've worked so hard for and are entitled to. And we're extending relief when it comes to the fuel excise, Mr Speaker. All of that happens from today, and that's why today is a really important day. Because even as petrol and diesel prices have come down over the last couple of months, even though inflation came down again in the figures released last week and unemployment came down again last week as well, we know that people are still under pressure, and that's why there is more help on the way from today, Mr Speaker. And we're providing that help at the same time as we manage the budget in a responsible way. On Friday, we learned that the deficit for the year just finished will be smaller than anticipated at budget time, and we know from the AOFM this week that our debt will be $200 billion less than the trajectory we inherited from those opposite. Now, if those opposite had their way, there'd be bigger deficits and more debt. If they had their way, there would be no tax cuts today and there'd be no extra cost of living help. And that's what makes the 3 right-wing parties indistinguishable from each other. Not just their shared anti-worker agenda, not just their shared anti-housing agenda, but that they seek to capitalise on the very real pressures that people are under at the same time as they come in here and they vote to make things worse rather than better, Mr Speaker. We are taking action to address the legitimate concerns that people have. They cling to a broken status quo in the housing market, and we are changing it, Mr Speaker. We are delivering real change to make it easier for first home buyers. We are delivering smaller deficits and less debt, Mr Speaker. We are delivering tax cuts and cost of living help. And today, because it's the 1st of July, means that more help is on the way.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Page.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, you said that families will be better off under your government, but under Labor, interest rates have increased 15 times, meaning an average new mortgage holder is around $30 a year worse off. Prime Minister, isn't it true that under Labor, Australians have experienced the biggest crash in living standards in the developed world?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'm asked about families and whether they're better off and what we're doing about it. Families will assist who are benefiting from the minimum wage going up today by 4.75%. Families will benefit by the increase as well in those on the absolute minimum of 6%. Families will benefit by every single Australian taxpayer getting a tax cut today. And I tell you what, not just families, but future families will benefit from its paid parental leave. Paid parental leave going to 6 months. We've increased it year after year after year to get it up to 6 months, And as well, we're paying superannuation on that paid parental leave as well, something never comprehended by those opposite. Families are benefiting from the work that we're doing on bulk billing, from the work we're doing opening urgent care clinics, from the cheaper medicines to deal with health costs as well. Families are benefiting who are putting in the cheaper home batteries. Some 450,000 of them have made sure that their energy bills are either zero or pretty close to it by installing a cheap home battery, which is making an enormous difference. And indeed, by them taking that action, it's also helping other people because it's taking pressure off the grid, making an enormous difference as well. And families are benefiting, young families, by changing the equation when it comes to housing, by recognising that there's a broken system here in Australia and giving them a fair crack at getting a roof over their own head. That is what delivering real change looks like. That's what a government that doesn't just identify issues but recognises that people are under pressure and says we are going to do something about it, like we did when it came to the crisis that came about due to the Middle East conflict. We didn't sit back and say that there were issues and we're not going to do anything about it. They've stopped asking questions about that. We made sure that Australians continued to have access to petrol, to diesel, to jet fuel, to fertiliser. We made sure that we delivered in a way in which those opposite prior to Easter were calling for rationing. Not identifying any solutions whatsoever, because they are the axis of grievance over there, the three right-wing parties that aren't interested in helping people, just interested in promoting grievance.
Call to the honourable member for Moreton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting Australian workers to get ahead, and what has stood in the way of this effort?
Call to the Minister for Employment and the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Moreton for her question and for her years and years of standing up for working Australians in this place and before she came here. Of course, this Albanese Labor government is delivering real change for Australians with a range of cost-of-living measures coming in from today. From today, millions of Australian workers will see a real boost to their pay, with minimum wage rises of above $1,000 a week for the first time. This is delivering real cost-of-living support for workers. And since the Albanese government came into office, we have advocated for an increase to the minimum wage every single time. That's 5 years in a row. And over the course of this government, workers on the minimum wage are now $12,000 better off because of our advocacy. Our commitment to boost the minimum wage has been welcomed by workers like Bianca. Bianca is a retail worker, and she said, getting this pay rise helps those in less fortunate situations like myself. And this pay rise means for Raj, a support worker, he can afford to buy a new bike for his son that he has been asking for. While our government is backing pay rises for our lowest paid workers, the same cannot be said for the three right-wing parties over there. We all know when the coalition was last in government, they never backed a real wage increase for workers. And of course, in the last few weeks, the Liberal Party, the National Party, One Nation have all refused time and time again to back this minimum wage that is coming in today. Of course, we know that not only is this government backing a minimum wage rise, but we're also backing tax cuts for workers. This government is delivering a fairer tax system for hard-working Australians. And from today, over 14 million taxpayers will get a tax cut delivered by this Labor government. Combined tax cuts outlined in this year's budget will mean Australian workers on average earnings will be up to $2,000 $2,800 a year better off under this Labor government. Now, of course, not only did those opposite oppose the minimum award rise that we've seen today, but they voted against tax cuts in this parliament. Those opposite were so committed to denying Australians tax cuts that they took a tax increase to income tax to the last election. Of course, those three right-wing parties have not changed their approach. In recent weeks, they've continued to vote against tax cuts over and over in this place. It is only this Labor government that will stand up for Australian workers.
Before I call the honourable member for Bradfield, just do a few acknowledgements. I'm very pleased to inform the House that joining us today on the floor of the Parliament is a distinguished delegation from Malaysia, including my friend His Excellency Tan Sri Dr. Johari bin Abdul, the Speaker of the House of Representatives of Malaysia, and Ya bin Hormat Dato' Sero Mohammed Khaled bin Nordin, the Malaysian Defence Minister, and Her Excellency Datin Paduka Sharina Abdullah, the High Commissioner of Malaysia to Australia. A very warm welcome to you all. I'm also pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is a delegation of Venezuelan Australians who are visiting Parliament House today to meet with ministers and members of the government to share their perspectives on the recent devastating earthquakes in Venezuela and to thank the Australian government for its support, and also Mr Atashi Karamata, the Consul-General of Japan in Western Australia, and the State Member for Bundamba, Lance McCallum, is joining us today as well. I give the call to the honourable member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. Today marks 80 years since the US began nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. It's also 63 years since Britain last tested on Australian soil, 30 years since France last detonated bombs on French Polynesia. Our Pacific family is calling loudly and clearly for us to honour the legacy of the lives lost and damaged by disease and environments destroyed by committing to ban nuclear weapons. When will the government sign the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons?
Call to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence.
Well, I thank the member for her question, and if you'll indulge me, Mr Speaker, can I just add my acknowledgement to my good friend Dato' Khaled bin Nordin, the Malaysian Defence Minister. It's great to see him in the House today. I thank the honourable member for her question. Today is the 80th anniversary of the first detonation by the United States of a nuclear weapon in the Pacific at Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. And over the decade or so which ensued from 1946, they detonated around 67 nuclear weapons, including the first detonation by the United States of a hydrogen bomb. And tomorrow will be the 60th anniversary of the first detonation of a nuclear weapon at the Mururoa Atoll in French Polynesia. And you are right in saying that both of those events characterise a deep sense of feeling within the Pacific around the role and place of nuclear weapons, such that the Rarotonga Treaty has characterised the Pacific by being a treaty which seeks to have the Pacific as a nuclear weapons-free part of the world, and we, of course, are a proud signatory to the Rarotonga Treaty. We have been, throughout the history of the Pacific Islands Forum, a supporter of the Marshall Islands in terms of all the impacts that have been felt by them of the ongoing impacts of the nuclear weapons tests there. Australia too understands this. At the Montebello Islands, off the coast of Western Australia, Emu Plain and South Australia, and of course Maralinga, we were a place of nuclear testing ourselves, and we know the impact that that has had in relation to our own First Nations peoples. We are, as a result of all of this, proud signatories of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. We have been from the outset signatories of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which has been the cornerstone of our support for trying to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. And it is worth noting that today there are less than 20% of the nuclear warheads in the world than there were at the peak in the 1980s, and the NPT has played its part. In terms of the ban treaty to which you refer, we are observing this very closely. We've attended all the meetings of the state parties since 2022. There are 3 concerns that we have in relation to it, but we continue to observe it. We obviously support the underlying desire to have a world free of nuclear weapons. But the first goes to the question of the enforcement architecture around the ban treaty. The second is its interaction with the Non-Proliferation Treaty and wanting to make sure that it doesn't undermine it. And the third goes to the universality of the signatories to the ban treaty. Right now there is no nuclear weapons state which is participating in it, and ultimately we need to have a regime in the world which actually does seek to change behaviour in relation to those who hold nuclear weapons. But we will continue to observe the progress of the ban treaty. We have a proud history and tradition in this country of working with countries around the world to seek to remove nuclear weapons from this world, and we will continue to pursue that tradition under the Albanese.
Call to the honourable member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitment to strengthen paid parental leave and its support for Australian families? What are the risks to this?
Call to the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Bendigo for her question. She is a fantastic, active, hard-working local member. So she knows that last year in her community, about 1,600 parents benefited from paid parental leave. This morning, the Prime Minister and I and the member for Canberra met gorgeous little babies Van and Lucas and their parents, and we were talking to them about what a difference paid parental leave has made for them. And of course, we're delighted that today that difference is even more significant, because today, the 1st of July, people will get the full 6 months of paid parental leave. They'll get more money at that higher rate, over $1,000 a week. They'll get their paid super, of course, as well. They get more flexibility, more time off, mums and dads together if they wish. And of course, more people are eligible as the thresholds increase. But it's not just about the huge increase in paid parental leave. That's not the only way we're helping families. We're increasing family tax benefit from today as well. The 3 hours of free power comes in today. Tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer. Increases to the minimum wage for 3 million workers. Stronger Medicare, and of course we're making it easier for people to get a home of their own. None of that, of course, is safe if those opposite ever have the opportunity to team up, the 3 right-wing parties together, because the Liberals, they've called mums on paid parental leaves rorters and double dippers. The member for Goldstein, who's here today, says it's not my choice that women have children, it's genetic. Senator Hansard in 2017 said women only get themselves pregnant for the money. And this year, in April, she said, listen, love, you have the equipment, that's what you're here for. Oh, look, they're having a great laugh about paid parental leave. This fits right in. This fits right in with the Shadow Minister's proposition. The Shadow Minister says they should do a rebranding exercise. They're going to get Scotty from marketing back. And he's going to ask modern Liberals, where the hell are they? They don't get paid parental leave. They don't get it. They don't want it. On this side, we support higher wages for working families. We support lower taxes for working families. We support stronger Medicare for working families. We support better schools and free TAFE and cheaper university for working families. We support higher family tax benefit, and we support more and better paid parental leave.
Order. Member for Macarthur is warned. Call to the honourable member for Lyne.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Isn't it true that the Albanese Labor government's 70-cent a day tax cut has already been eaten up by inflation, unlike the Coalition's tax-back guarantee, which is protected from inflation and would provide a typical Australian worker a far bigger $400 tax cut this year?
Order. The Minister for Social Services is warned. The Prime Minister has the call.
I'm asked about the tax cut that comes in today, Mr Speaker. The tax cut that is a part of our trajectory, which when we came into office had the first income tax bracket being at 19 cents and has taken it down to 15 cents today. It'll be 14 cents next year on July 1. That is making a substantial difference to working families. But it's not just tax cuts, of course. It's also paying them more, which is why the minimum wage increases that have come in today, our fifth lot, will make a difference. Because we want people to earn more and keep more of what they earn. And I'm asked about the tax cuts today and by coalition policy, believe it or not, Mr Speaker. I have been that lucky, because coalition policy for the tax cut that came in today was to come into this parliament, if they were successful on May 3 last year, and to reverse it. So their policy was zero. To be fair to the member for Lyons, she wasn't here then, but everyone who was here on the right-wing parties, even if they were in different parties at that time, because it's hard to keep up, Mr Speaker, to be fair, with the titles over there, but they voted for $75 billion in higher personal income taxes. They voted for $14 billion of higher taxes on the resources and manufacturing sectors by abolishing production tax credits. They voted for higher taxes on motorists by abolishing the EV concession, higher taxes on housing construction by abolishing build-to-rent. They voted for or wanted higher student debts by abolishing the 20% cut, and they wanted to, of course, abolish the cheaper home batteries program, like everything else in the renewable space. And, of course, they also— I was asked about your policies.
Resume your seat, please, Prime Minister, and we'll hear from the manager.
Goes to relevance, Speaker. The question was around tax policies, comparing our $400 to your 70 cents a day. It wasn't about all these other— It needs to be relevant to that policy.
The microphone's turned up when the Speaker says resume your seat. That's how it works. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Speaker, just to the point of order, the Manager of Opposition Business would have to have known that when they asked about opposition policy, the answer was going to involve opposition policy.
Yeah. We'll hear it. We'll give the manager the opportunity to raise his point of order as well.
Been rulings by speakers on this. Sure, compare and contrast on tax policy, because that's what the question was asked about. But the Prime Minister cannot just wander off and talk about anything else that he likes, and there's rulings to that accord.
Yeah. So the way I'd like to handle this with the House's support is, if the question referred to coalition tax policy, particularly the tax-back guarantee, the Prime Minister has covered that, so I'm just going to ask him to assist the House to return to coalition tax policy. Order, because the manager was correct. That's what he was asked about. He wasn't asked about any other coalition policies. If he was, he'd be able to talk about every policy. But if the Prime Minister can assist the House by referring to the coalition's tax policies, that will assist the House and, I think, address the member's question. Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm more than happy to, Mr Speaker, because they went to an election under this leader, who was the shadow treasurer, and called for higher taxes. They were opposed to the tax cuts that came in today. And then in the Parliament, just a matter of weeks ago, with this year's budget, they voted against the working Australians tax offset. They voted against tax cuts, not something that that
Order. The Leader of the Nationals in the House of Representatives.
In their own mind, when the three parties of grievance have this right-wing nirvana sometime down the track.
Time has concluded. Order. The Prime Minister's time has concluded. Order. It's far too much. The member for Canning is not assisting the House. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the member for Holt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. What are the measures starting today will help strengthen Medicare and deliver cost of living relief for Australians? Why is this so important after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Give the call to the Minister for Health, the Minister for Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Holt. I know she does everything she can to deliver and promote cost of living relief to the hard-working people of the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. I know she's delighted that the bulk billing rate in her electorate is now over 94%, that three-quarters of practices in her electorate bulk bill 100% of their patients 100% of the time. And I know she knows this is a big day for cost of living relief in Australia. A big pay rise for millions of low-paid workers, a tax cut for every Australian worker, more relief at the Bowser for another month, more time for new parents with their beautiful new babies, up to 6 months now, knowing that the bills will be covered by our extended paid parental leave, Mr Speaker, and we're doing more to make Medicare even stronger and medicines even cheaper, Mr Speaker. Finally today, our hard-working public hospitals are freed from the mediocrity of the Morrison-era funding agreement, Mr Speaker. We know that demand and pressures on public hospitals are climbing year on year on year, and this side of the parliament is not going to nickel and dime hard-working doctors and nurses in public hospitals the way the Liberal Party always did, Mr Speaker. They would have received under that agreement about $12 billion in growth funding over 5 long years. Under this agreement signed by this Prime Minister, they'll get triple that amount, $37 billion, to keep them doing their important work in our 750 public hospitals, Mr Speaker. And I'm also delighted to say to the member for Holt and others that from today we deliver another chapter in our support for women during menopause and perimenopause. Last year, for the first time in decades, we finally listed new menopause hormone treatments for Australia's women. Last year, we introduced a new assessment item for women to talk to their GPs about issues associated with menopause and perimenopause. And from today, led by the Assistant Minister for Health, we're extending the work of our successful endometriosis and pelvic pain clinics to include issues associated with menopause and perimenopause. And last but certainly not least, Mr Speaker, today is a bumper day for the PBS. It is a bumper day for the PBS with 10 new life-saving, life-changing medicines added today that will benefit tens and tens of thousands of Australian patients. 5 new medicines for different types of cancer, a new medicine for growth hormone deficiency, for severe asthma, for myasthenia gravis, for a whole range of other conditions as well, Mr Speaker. Some of them would have cost tens of thousands of dollars without being added to the PBS. All of this, Mr Speaker, is making a real difference to Australians, to their household budgets, to their health, and it's building a healthier Australia.
Before I call the Leader of the Opposition, the member for Goldstone is interjecting constantly during answer. The MPI is on today. I assume he wants to lead the MPI. So, if there's any more interjections, I want to be crystal clear on this. If there are any more interjections from the member for Goldstone, I've been very fair with him for the position he holds, we won't be having an MPI today. So we have an MPI if the member for Goldstone doesn't interject anymore. Give a call to the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Labor's toxic taxes are tanking the housing market. Housing data released today shows house prices have already fallen further than Treasury predicted, around 3% in Sydney and Melbourne over the last quarter. And HSBC and Morgan Stanley predict further falls of 8 to 10%. Will the Prime Minister guarantee house prices won't fall any further?
The call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'm asked about house prices and our tax policy, and I'm more than happy to announce that our tax policy is indeed about helping first homeowners get into their own home. And that is the primary purpose of housing, is a secure roof over people's heads. And that is what is being delivered. It's been delivered for people like Kristen Williams, 31. He'd given up on ever owning a home of his own in the electorate of Macnamara. I was trying to save pretty aggressively, and you just read there's another 7% increase this month, there's a 2% increase this month. It just feels like a runaway dream at that point. I'm feeling a little bit more confident now.
Member for Bowen.
In Albury, Andrea Lever from Ray White, Albury North Managing Director, said this: first home buyer confidence was on the rise. I don't feel they're competing with as many investors. Jason Barnett in Geelong, the Managing Director of Barnett Real Estate. First home buyers are the active market. In Camperdown in the electorate of Sydney, Juan Darcy said that the purchasers there of a two-bedroom warehouse conversion apartment that was sold.
The member for Casey.
They were familiar with the area and they all wanted to live in a property that was close to the action.
The member for Bennelong.
It's real people.
Prime Minister will just pause a moment. The member for Menzies will leave the chamber under 94A. When I'm listening to the Leader of the Opposition or any member making a point of order, do not interject the Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister hasn't even attempted to answer the question of whether he will guarantee that house prices won't fall further.
Order. The Prime Minister was asked about the prices of houses and tax policy, as indicated. He's reading some examples into the Hansard and to the record regarding the issue of how. I don't know what he's going to say next. I don't know, but if he's reading examples about the topic he was asked about and people buying houses, that is pretty relevant to the question. I'll listen carefully to make sure he is being directly relevant. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And I take it. I take the interjection from the Leader of the Opposition. He said, why is it relevant? I tell you what's relevant is people getting into their own home. That's what's relevant. People like Brooklyn, Lockie and their dog Roscoe in the electorate of Corangamite, where we were, at Clifton Springs just a little while ago. This is what they had to say. Renting was frustrating because our money wasn't going anywhere, but now it is. That's exactly the point, because now they had a chance to invest in themselves, in a roof over their own head with the security that it got. That is happening in electorates and in states and territories right around this nation. That is what we are aiming for, making sure that young people get a fair crack, unlike those opposite, who their housing spokesperson has said just yesterday on ABC. They said that they basically have lost their way for 2 decades. For 2 decades.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Griffith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to protect the environment and make approvals more efficient? What stood in the way?
Call to the Leader of the House representing the Minister for the Environment, the Minister for Water.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And isn't it good again to have a member for Griffith who cares about delivering for the environment? Because it's been the case that all the major environmental outcomes for this country have been delivered by Labor governments. As a Queenslander, the member for Griffith knows all too well that the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park exists because of the Whitlam government. Members know that the saving of the Franklin, the Daintree, of Kakadu, of the largest environmental protection decision in the history of the planet in the Antarctic and the protection in the Antarctic all happened through the years of the Hawke-Keating governments. That when we were last in government, the second largest conservation decision in the history of the planet, the marine national parks that were put in place, and earlier the expansion of those marine parks in our first term. And today, after a long campaign by many members who I look at on the backbench of this party and this government after a long campaign. Today, the Albanese Labor government establishes day one of the National Environmental Protection Agency. For a long time, we needed a modern and efficient regulator so that people had clear understanding of our environmental laws to make sure that those laws were followed. Thanks to the reforms that were passed last year, we now have a strong regulatory toolkit. We have stronger powers for environmental protection. We have expanded auditing framework. We have increased penalties for serious and deliberate environmental harm. It means you get consistency. It means you get transparency. It means you get integrity in environmental decision-making at a national level. The EPA will be a strong, independent regulator. It will better protect our unique natural environment for generations to come. It will act as the agile, independent umpire that Australia's environment needs. It's the cornerstone and something that both business and environmental groups were calling for environmental reform, where this government came to the table to deliver. But the three right-wing parties once again all did the exact same thing. Voted no to better protections for the environment, voted no to having a streamlined independent system, voted no to making sure that Australia would have a National Environmental Protection Agency. The 1st of July involves many changes that are positive for this nation, and the EPA stands high as one of them.
Give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister guarantee that house prices won't fall further?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Our housing policies are aimed at giving young people a fair crack. And we've changed the system so that this Saturday, if a young couple turn up at an auction, they're not competing versus an investor.
Order. The member for Cowper.
An investor who has taxpayer support. So if they bid an extra $20,000 or $50,000, they know that they actually get a bonus, and every taxpayer helping them out by increasing the deductions under negative gearing. Now, what we are doing is making sure that people who are negatively gearing properties, when the changes came in, they can still continue to do so. And what's more, young people or anyone else can continue to invest in a negatively geared property as well.
Order.
Oh.
I'll hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Yes, Speaker. Goes to relevance, and I refer to a statement by Speaker Smith on the 2nd December 2020. He says, in doing that, he needs to address the question that was asked, not just deal with material that is on the policy topic, but not having dealt with the question itself. And the Prime Minister has not dealt with the question about a guarantee on falling house prices.
I just want to deal with this. I also want to refer to Speaker Smith's ruling on the 1st of March, where he ruled about policy topics and that points of order were not to be used as an opportunity to repeat the question. And we've strayed into this territory now of points of order where people are simply repeating the question and adding extra things in. So if you wish to take a point of order on relevance, that's okay. But at this stage, the Prime Minister— No, I'm not— Well, let me finish what I'm saying and then you may respond. Yeah, that's the normal process. Like, I don't interrupt you when you're on your feet. Order. So whilst the leniency is there for allow points of order to be taken on relevance, there have been precedents where that lenience has been withdrawn. I'm not going to do that in this case, but I'll hear from the manager if he's got something else to say.
Further to the point that I was making, and it goes to what Speaker Smith had to say, it says he needs to address the question that was asked. And that was the point that I was making.
Yeah. And under the standing orders, I can appreciate the Leader of the Opposition would like a yes-no answer, right? Because that's what he was directly asked about. But the standing orders don't allow the Speaker to direct any minister to directly answer a question. They've got to be directly relevant. So if the Prime Minister is talking about the policy, he is being directly relevant. Now, if you'd like to change the standing orders, you're welcome to suggest those. But I've had those discussions with members before, but no one's taken me up on that option. But at this stage, if the Prime Minister is being directly relevant about the policy that he was asked about, in this case it was about house prices, so we're just going to make sure he is being directly relevant to that. Thanks, Leader of the Opposition. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Important for
questions. All right, the manager can have order. The manager can have.
Well, I'm
the
allowed
call.
to say it. That's my job, and I don't need the peanut gallery interrupting.
Resume your seat. Order. Members on my right are not going to interject, and I don't like that sort of terminology as we had that issue. The member for Remuera is correct. It is not the Coliseum. So if everyone can remind themselves not to interject and use that sort of phraseology, everyone here is in their own right as a member of Parliament. Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? We're moving to the next question. Order. 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 When the House comes to order. We'll hear from the member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services. What steps is the Albanese Labor government taking to deliver real change and help Australians deal with the rising cost of living pressures at the supermarket checkout?
Call to the Assistant Treasurer and the Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the member for Adelaide for his question, and he has been a champion throughout his time in this place for cost of living supports, and he understands how important this is, particularly when it comes to households putting food on the table. Speaker, from today, new rules are in place to prevent excessive pricing by supermarkets. And I want to pay tribute and acknowledge the work of the Assistant Minister for Productivity and Competition, who has led much of the work when it comes to the development of these new rules. The recent ACCC Supermarkets inquiry found what many Australians already know. It found that Woolworths and Coles closely monitor each other's pricing and strategies and have limited incentive to compete vigorously on price. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that Woolworths and Coles aren't the only Australian brands that closely monitor what their competition does. The three right-wing political parties opposite closely monitor each other, and they are closely converging on their product offering at the minute. And while we can't stop all examples of brand copycats, we can do something about the big supermarkets and their price gouging. That's why from today it will be illegal for large supermarkets such as Coles and Woolworths to charge prices that are excessive when compared to the cost of supply plus a reasonable margin. And these reforms come with big penalties if breached. Any retailers found to be in breach will face the greater of $10 million, 3 times the value of the benefit derived or 10% of annual turnover during the preceding 12 months. These are tough laws with big penalties which are in the best interests of consumers. But they form part of a broader package of reforms to strengthen protections for Australians at the supermarket checkout. We've increased the maximum penalties for breaches of Australian competition and consumer laws from $10 million in 22 to $100 million per breach in 2026. That's a 10-fold increase in the penalties that we inherited when we came to government. We've also made the Food and Grocery Code mandatory, with strong protections for suppliers and significant penalties for supermarkets that breach the code. A measure those opposite voted against, again acting in the interests of the status quo and opposed to those measures in the interests of consumers. We've also funded Choice to provide shoppers with more information on supermarket prices. Mr Speaker, Choice is obviously very important for Australian consumers in this and other areas. Speaker, consumers can choose a Labor government that is delivering real change and protecting them at the supermarket checkout, or they can choose the three right-wing parties who oppose support for Australians at every step of the way and stand only for the status quo.
Before I call the member for Fowler, I'm also pleased to inform the House that President of the Gallery today have representatives from Berkshire, Carpentaria Shire Council, Mornington Island Aboriginal Shire Council and Doomadgee Aboriginal Shire Council visiting from the Gulf of Carpentaria in the northwest of Queensland as guests of the member for Kennedy. And I'd also like to recognise former member for Patterson, the Honourable Bob Baldwin, joining us today in the gallery today as well. Give the call to the Honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Energy. Minister, you've written to the ACCC and AER over the retailer conduct on fixed charges. From today, households are promised 3 hours of so-called free power, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m, when most Fowler families are at work and still paying fixed charges and full price outside that window. Can the Minister guarantee this isn't a give with one hand, take with the other scheme, and no household energy bill goes up?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for Energy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for the question, but I can confirm for the honourable member there is nothing so-called about free power when it's a requirement of law for the energy companies to provide it as an option to people in the relevant jurisdictions, Mr Speaker, including the constituents of Fowler. Now, we've been very clear that solar sharer is not for everyone. But for those people who can move power to the middle of the day, whether they be people who work from home, who on this side of the House support, or whether it be people who can use their smart devices to schedule their devices to be used in the middle of the day, it is a very good option for them, Mr Speaker, and that is why we are requiring energy companies to deliver it. And we say to energy companies it is a requirement of law that it be delivered from today. Now, Mr Speaker, the other elements that we are delivering include the default market offer, which has seen people in the Endeavour Energy Network, which covers the people of Fowler, receive a 3.4% reduction this year, Mr Speaker. The other thing we are delivering, Mr Speaker, is cheaper home batteries, which the 2,720 households in Fowler have taken up, are also reducing their bills very dramatically, and that is a rate in Fowler which is substantially more than other electorates. The member for Fowler has previously claimed that this is a policy for inner-city electorates. That is just not true, Mr Speaker, because the people of Fowler are taking up cheaper home batteries at a much faster rate than electorates that have higher wealth than the people of Fowler, because the people of Fowler want to reduce their bills and they know that cheaper home batteries are a very good option to do so. That's why this government has been delivering it. I'm disappointed the member for Fowler doesn't support that policy.
The call to the honourable member for Tangney.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Small Business. What additional support is the Albanese Labor government providing to small businesses from today, and what are the risks to this? Thank you.
Call to the Minister for International Development, the Minister for Small Business and the Minister for Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And I do want to thank the member for Tagney for his question, but also for his incredible advocacy for small businesses in his electorate of Tagney. And it wasn't that long ago that the member for Tagney and I visited a really impressive small business in Willetton, the Willetton Trophy Centre. It's a family-owned business passed on from generation to generation, and they've been able to really grow through innovation, through being adaptable, but also through their incredible hard work and their ambition. And really, Mr Speaker, that's what small business is all about, isn't it? It's about people backing themselves. It's about families taking a risk and putting in the long hours, employing locals and building up communities. And the Albanese Labor government backs in that ambition and that aspiration. because we understand that when Australia's 2.77 million small businesses grow, then local communities grow with them. And when I speak to small business owners, as I travel around the country talking to them, they tell me about their challenges, about their pain points. Things like cash flow, red tape, access to staff, operating costs and, of course, global uncertainty. And that's why, from today, the Albanese Labor government is delivering real change to help small businesses manage pressure, to invest and to plan with confidence. So from today, our changes kick in. We're making the $20,000 instant asset write-off permanent, so that small businesses can have certainty to invest in the tools and the equipment and assets that they need. We're also delivering a permanent 2-year loss carryback for companies with a turnover of up to $1 billion, so that they can return to profitability faster. We're cutting red tape and lowering compliance costs by removing a further 497 nuisance tariffs, and that's going to save businesses around $127 million a year. We're supporting small businesses to take up digital technology, we're making it easier to access workers with the right skills, and we're providing free access to mandatory standards. That's going to save some small businesses more than $1,600 a year. We're also continuing new access for small business owners and the Small Business Debt Helpline. This is a government that backs people who work hard, people who take risks and build for the future, whether they work for a business or whether they own a business. That's why we're delivering real change for Australians, including tax cuts for workers and sole traders, something that the 3 right-wing parties voted against. Mr Speaker, we back all taxpayers on this side of the House. We back families, we back parents and we back small business.
Give the call to the member for Dawson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. A flat white costs $2 more today than it did in 2022 when Labor came to power. The government's 70-cent a day tax cut won't even cover the increase, let alone the coffee itself. Prime Minister, why does Labor keep making Australians pay more?
Order. Give the call to order. Give the call to the members on my right. Will cease interjecting, otherwise I'll be forced to issue a general warning. Call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, we on this side of the House are proudly today, on the 1st of July, talking about the tax cuts that come in, talking about the real wage increases, talking about the Medicare urgent care clinics, the extra pharmaceuticals on the PBS. We're talking about the additional free TAFE places, the fact we've made Medicare urgent care clinics permanent. We're talking about the additional 2 weeks paid parental leave, taking it up to 6 months. We're talking about payday super. We're talking about all that, and they're talking about a cup of coffee. What we're talking about, no wonder some of the ones on the front say that they need a rebrand. Mr Speaker, because they certainly do, because there's certainly time to take the Liberal out of the Liberal Party. But it's not their brand, it's their product that's the problem, Mr Speaker. It's not your sales pitch, it's your policies. It's not what you call yourselves, it's who you are. It's the fact that you vote against any change to cost of living that will help people.
Order. The Minister for Infrastructure. Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? The Manager on a point of order.
It goes to relevance, Speaker, and this wasn't about alternatives. This was about cost of living, what's happening to inflation. It's got nothing to do with what he's quoting. And you've said it before, Speaker, the Prime Minister just can't randomly quote things. He's got to remain relevant to the question.
To assist the House, I'm going to ask the Prime Minister if he is quoting a document or reading, as the Manager said, that he makes it directly relevant to the question. Otherwise, he won't be able to use it.
It's about cost of living, as the Manager of Opposition Business just said. And what I'm talking about It's the cost of living support, which we're giving on this side of the House, that those on this side of the House voted against. Every single one of these measures they voted against. Well, I'm really proud of what we are doing. Strongest annual economic growth in almost 3 years. Inflation lower than it was when we came to government. Wages going up. Pay packets growing much faster than any time under the coalition.
Member for Hinkler.
Smallest gender pay gap on record.
Order. The member for Page.
Lowest average unemployment in 50 years. We are laser-like focused on cost of living. Those opposite vote against every single cost of living measure.
Give a call to the honourable member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government helping households to lower their bills by taking advantage of Australia's world-class sunshine? What policies would put a stop to this progress?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable member for the question and thank her for our recent visit to a wonderful part of the world. And one of the things we did was talk about cheaper home batteries, Mr. Speaker. And today's the 1st of July, Mr. Speaker, which means the cheaper home battery policy is officially 1 year old today. And I'm pleased to tell the House that 457,439 Australian households have installed a cheaper home battery since the 1st of July, Mr. Speaker, which means, on average, 1,255 Australian households have put in a cheaper home battery every single day for the last 12 months. 1,255. And it also means, Mr. Speaker, that not in per capita terms, not per head terms, but in absolute terms, Australia has now more household batteries than the largest, most populous state in the United States of America, California. That's the achievement of Australians over the last 12 months. And since we came to office, home batteries were in 1 in 60 houses. Now it's 1 in 17. And that's wonderful for those families that are reducing their bills, in many cases to nothing, in some cases getting a rebate instead of a bill, but it's very good for putting downward pressure on energy prices for everyone. And in addition, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member asked me how Australians can access the benefits of renewable energy, and because it's the 1st of July today, it also means solar sharer is now available for consumers in New South Wales, in South East Queensland and South Australia, which is a requirement on energy companies to provide the option of 3 hours of free electricity in the middle of the day, Mr. Speaker, when the solar energy is at its strongest and abundant. And those people who take that offer up, Morgan Stanley have found, for example, that some families could save $660 a year, which we on this side of the House think is a good thing. Those on that side of the House are opposed to. So we see this start today, and it is a requirement of law for energy companies to deliver it from the day, which we expect every single energy company covered to comply with. Now, Mr. Speaker, it's also the case that from the day rule changes the government has requested have come into force. That means that there can only be one price rise each year. It means that there must be a fee-free option to pay. It means that customers whose discounted plans expire can't simply be moved to a higher cost plan, Mr. Speaker. And it means that there can't be excessive fees for late payments. These are all changes that come into force from today because the Albanese Labor government asked for those rules to change, as well as solar sharer coming into force today because we put it into place, as well as cheap home batteries which have worked for 12 months to help so many thousands, 457,000 Australian households reduce their bills, which is a good thing. We will stand with those households. We will protect those policies. Those opposite would abolish those policies.
Call to the Prime Minister.
To further questions be placed on the notice paper.